I'd like to have you all welcome Hamid, who is a great friend and a fellow Canadian. And he is going to share with us about marketing innovation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I don't know how much of that I deserve. And I'm just going to say it straight out. Change sucks. Change is hard. Change is painful. But and honestly, like, I don't want to change. But there are ways that you can make it easier. So what I'm really excited to share with you today is some tools that you can use to bring innovation into sales and marketing. So while we're thank you. Let me just see where we are. No, that was not where I wanted to start. This is where I wanted to start. So, so 3 acts, where innovation even comes from. And then I want to talk about some tools to give you so that you can actually apply innovation both personally and professionally and as a team, hopefully. And then just leaving you with some kind of action items, just some homework, or not even homework, just some, maybe a challenge for how to apply one of these tools that you learned today. So, my consulting firm does a lot of work. We work exclusively in the life sciences. And I have been part of expanding our consulting firm into other industries in healthcare. And so the graph that you showed, Jasmine, is not that surprising to me, because in industries like pharma, the innovation department, and yes, they actually have an innovation department, sits in marketing. Who here is surprised by that? I was shocked. Because, and this is a great quote. So I was working with a director of marketing at a life science company, and he said, I can't do my job because R&D hasn't given me anything new in like 5 years. Like, how am I supposed to actually market if I have nothing new to market? I'm like, you're not really doing marketing then. You're just describing what you see come out of product development. That's not marketing. That's definitely not strategy, and that's not innovation. I just want to say, like, if you take nothing else out of today, or out of my talk at least, there's a lot of great content in store for you today, but if you get nothing else out of my talk, innovation is a mandate for every single function of the company, because that's how a company generates value. That's the bottom line. So if you're in customer service, innovation's a mandate there. If you're in shipping, innovation's a mandate there. So why isn't it that sales and marketing should be excused from that, right? And so I want to change that. I want to change, and you are all the people who are going to change this, which is why I'm so delighted to be speaking with you today. So that's a common misperception, that innovation comes out of R&D or product development. Yes, they are doing innovation, right? They're pushing around like electrons and bending the laws of Newtonian physics, and it's awesome, right? But we also have that mandate to innovate. So I really want to bring this into our collective part of the industry. But when I say innovation, people think of different things. What really is innovation? Well, it turns out that there's actually multiple types of innovation. And this is the technology adoption curve. So essentially, in the 1960s in Iowa, some academics actually realized that farmers were adopting new technology at different rates. And they wanted to know why. And they found out that it actually follows a perfect bell curve, and that it's based on the psychographics of these farmers. It had nothing to do with like the sort of the conditions or anything like that. It's just how they felt about applying technology. So just very quickly, and I'm sorry that this is probably, you all probably know this, but you know, a new novel technology comes in, breaks everything that was there before. there's a very small group of people who are going to want to line up and get that, right? And then they move on. These are early adopters, still very technology enthusiasts. For these people, for the innovators, the product doesn't even have to be a product, right? It can just be a promise, and they still want to get their hands on it. It doesn't need to do anything for them. Just a promise alone they'll shell out their money. They'll take out their checkbook. For the early adopters, it needs to be a product. And really very much driven by this utopian promise of how it's just going to completely change the world and you're going to be, coming to work riding on a unicorn. Now, the early majority are much more pragmatic, still driven by promise, but very much around this idea of it's got to work and it's got to work for me. And it's got to do the thing, it's got to make my life different in the way that you promise that it makes my life different. So these people want a lot of proof. Now, once you get to the apex, everybody on the other side is driven by fear. Everyone on this side was driven by promise. Everyone on the other side is driven by fear. So the late majority people they're like, you know what? It still has to work, but it's got to be easy. It's just make it really, really kind of seamless. Take all the doodads away, and then I'll start to adopt it. And then the late adopters are like, really, take a lot of the doodads away. Just make it super, super easy. This is when McDonald's started offering lattes. Right here. And then these people will only buy a latte when a coffee is no longer available. That's essentially that's these laggards. So if any market is dominated by these psychographics, then you need to have specific types of innovation that speak to each of those. Because a really good company doesn't just launch a product and then sit back and be like, God, I really hope that product does well. Where's the popcorn? No, they actually manage the entire life cycle of that product, right? And by managing that life cycle of product, that means that they're putting innovation in to really drive that product going from one of these steps to the other. So we all know disruptive innovation. We're in Silicon Valley. The term is, the terms innovation is always preceded by disruption. This is where we say when the change is hard, this is when it's hardest, right? Disruptive innovation means that your day will break for a long time. You will not have the sort of the fun familiarity of coming to work and doing the same stuff. It's like, imagine if all of the computer systems that you all use in your work had to change, go to something that none of us are familiar with overnight. That's disruption, right? And so for a lot of the people that we market to, these scientists, they come to work every day and things are happening. They don't really want disruption, right? And so that's disruptive technology, that's disruptive innovation. It's very important, it creates whole new markets, but it's really hard. Then you have to apply that to specific groups. This is like to grab your beachhead in the market, application innovation. And then you got to really make the product robust. So product innovation is really the next step of that. Then once you get into the early majority, now you have to make it easier. Processes have to come into place. Like, a technology that really seems promising, pharma's not adopting it. Why? Because it's not ready for enterprise grade. That's what they mean by this. They mean, how are you going to supply me all this stuff? How are you going to make sure that my stuff doesn't break? How are you going to make sure that it passes all of my regulatory hurdles? Like, all of those questions really happen right here. And then there's experiential innovation. How I get this stuff. What is my experience in connecting with that, with this product? Now we're into the fear zone, right? Marketing innovation becomes really important here. Hello, marketers. So these are different ways that you actually market and different ways that you find new channels, new pricing schemes, things like that. Business model innovation comes in toward the very end when you're really trying to take the doodads away and the costs out and make this thing the simple essence of what it's meant to do That's where you have new business model innovation. I'm sure that many of you flew here on a Boeing jet, any of you who flew, or if you've flown in the last year. Did you know that those Boeing jets, the engines, the power plants that are on there, don't belong to Boeing? They never bought them. They never made them. They belong to GE. GE leased it to them. So literally your plane without GE is a tin can. It's not going anywhere. But GE applied business model innovation by flipping it on its head, and they basically charge Boeing by the mile. So that's business model innovation. And then structural innovation is where like industries that you would have never thought could come together, or companies that come together, or even different systems, parts of your business come together. Like for example, what if tomorrow somehow magically marketing became a function of HR? Weird, right? Structural innovation. That's what we mean by that. So different types of innovation. Let me give you some more examples really quickly. We all buy groceries, we all eat food. Process innovation, and we all kind of went through a pandemic recently, so we saw this change in real time. Grocery delivery became really mainstream right around March or April of 2020. Process innovation. And then something like experiential innovation is, I'm not really that much of a cook. The prep time is kind of a pain. I need inspiration. I'm just going to go on these websites. I'm going to order the food that I want, like a menu, and then everything is going to show up at my door pre-chopped with a really cute card that says add A to B and C and cook it for 10 minutes and you'll have a delicious meal. Hello Fresh. That is experiential innovation. That's an example of experiential innovation. It's still the same thing. You're still getting food, right? Marketing innovation. This is a phenomenal example. I used to live in Berkeley, California, and in Oakland, the Whole Foods was sort of like an open secret that the fresh food bar between 5 and 6:30 p.m. was the #1 hookup spot in all of Oakland. Cooking classes for singles, right in the store. That's marketing innovation, right? You find an insight and you exploit that insight. Business model innovation is, new ways where grocery can come. Have you noticed when you go try to buy anything that is like some sort of a staple in your house, Amazon practically begs you to subscribe to it? Like, and why don't you? Because I don't want 14,000 cans of tomato paste because I don't know what my usage is going to be. The innovation they should actually do is to somehow measure my usage and then just adjust it, right? But they're trying so hard with Alexa, but it's still not there. But those are the examples of business model innovation. And then, now that we're on the Amazon kick, let's talk about the fact that they bought Whole Foods. That is structural innovation. Right? So those are examples. In our space, process innovation is like, let's say there's a website where you can go and optimize your codons for a gene construct. Let's say you want to buy some genes, and then you can just order it right there, right? Perfect process innovation. I gave you the example earlier about like, to get into pharma, you have to have, you have to be ready with the regulatory and all that stuff. Experiential innovation, company like Greenova, they wash your pipettes. Or a company like Quartzy, who is basically, they give away a free piece of software for you to have all the inventory in your lab so that you know how much ethanol you have and how much H2SO4 you have and how much whatever you have. And then, oh, by the way, if you're running low, you can just buy it from them. Brilliant. And those are examples of experiential innovation. Marketing innovation, Lilly Direct. I know that's not life sciences, it's pharma, but like, wow, a pharma company is now selling their drugs directly to you. That's an example of marketing innovation. Business models. So who knows the second largest CDMO in this space? It's Thermo Fisher. Right? You'd never think of Thermo Fisher as a CDMO, but they're like, we have all the stuff. We have all the science. Why don't we just make it? Right? That's an example of business model innovation. And then structural innovation is like basically like all the incubator labs, I know NEB was really involved and early on in supplying those incubator labs, brilliant structural innovation. So these things actually do exist in our industry if we just codify it and we apply it to say, okay, we're moving from this part of the market to that part of the market. What kind of innovation should we apply? And you all are the people who are going to do that. You are all the people who are going to do that. So we already covered this, right? We don't need to cover this again. But there are actually ways to make innovation a little easier, because turns out that the human brain is highly predictable in the way that it acts. You're all getting nervous now, aren't you? I did that on purpose because I just actually, if you actually got nervous, raise your hand. Come on, be honest. Okay, there are ways that you can actually leverage the predictability of the human brain to make change and make innovation a little bit easier. I want to preface this by saying this is highly relevant to all of you salespeople and all of you sales managers, because these are tools that you can use to get to yes a little bit easier. It is also highly relevant to marketers for two reasons. One, by looking for insights within your customers, by looking and seeing how can I actually make change in my customers, but also how do I apply change internally to my teams, right? Teams and change dynamics are kind of difficult. So the first one is reciprocity. I do something for you. You may be more likely to say yes to me if I ask you for something, because you just have this feeling of indebtedness. So by invoking a sense of reciprocity, you can get to yes a little bit easier, and change can happen a little bit more freely. The next one is scarcity. People want what they can't have. I'm telling you, the most powerful word in any language is no. It is the most powerful word. People want what they can't have. Make something scarce, they want it more. You go and look up alcohol, tobacco, and firearms definition of vodka. It's very clear what vodka is. So why is it that Stolichnaya has a bottle for $11 and a bottle for $3,000? It's the same stuff, exactly as defined by alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And yet we pay $3,000 for a bottle because it's rare, right? Do you remember Hostess went out of business for a short period of time? Twinkies were being sold for $200. I mean, the same person who might have been like, Twinkies are disgusting. Like, well, you can never have one again. Oh my God, I want a Twinkie. I mean, it's huge. Like, look, people aren't stupid. Our brains are wired this way. And you can actually use these as a way to get to yes, to make change a little bit easier. Authority is a really clear sign of making change. So this is already familiar territory with all of us. We call these people KOLs, right? But here's the interesting research around authority and how it actually signals change. It doesn't matter where the signal of authority comes from. It can come from anybody. It can come from the person sitting next to you. It can come from the next salesperson. You go to visit someone with an FAS, the FAS can signal authority. I'll actually share the research. So part of the research that they did, this is Cialdini's work. They went into a real estate company, and then they just changed the script for the person who answers the phone. Right? This is the person who answers the phone. And basically, they just changed one line in the transfer that was happening. So if you called and you said, I'm interested in talking to an agent about representing me for selling my house, the person answering the phone was instructed to say, I'm going to transfer you to Clarissa. She has 15 years of experience representing sellers just like you. And the same thing with buyers. I'm going to transfer you to David. He has 12 years of experience representing buyers just like you. The number of contracts went up by 20%. One line by the receptionist made 20% more business for a company, right? Authority can come from anywhere. Yes, KOLs are awesome. I want them as part of my, as part of my arsenal of marketing, but they're not the only way to do it. You can actually signal authority from within the company. It works. Is this interesting, by the way? Okay. I meant to say this at the beginning, and I totally forgot. I'm just going to talk at you, but but I'd much prefer if you talk back at me. So if you have questions or comments or even jokes, just raise your hand. I don't need to wait until the end. Okay, I should have said that at the beginning. So likeness, like attracts like. We know that it's a very common technique. Relationship-based selling is a technique. It works. You form a relationship with that with your customer, and you get that. But that's because what's happening psychologically is they're like, oh, this person's just like me, and then they're much more willing to do business with you. This actually happened in marketing as well. If you remember the time at Life Tech when they were doing Life in the Lab, that was a likeness campaign, and their social media numbers went through the roof. They just made it fun. They're like, we're young, we're youthful, we're in the lab, you're in the lab. Dating tips for young scientists. Want to buy Novex gel? and that was essentially what they were doing. They were trying to attract new customers and new attention by generating likeness. The other one is availability. And this is not, so it's not availability of a product, it's availability of a story. So this is how it works. If someone, so the wrong question to ask is, how often does this happen to you? The right question to ask is, can you think of the last time this happened to you? Right? If you're trying to show the problem statement, don't ask how often it happens. Ask, when was the last time? We were working with Biorad, and they had a new line of PCR plastics. This is years ago, and the resin that they used just did not warp. And a PCR cycler is basically a heater. So you put plastic on a heater, you know what's going to happen. But if your 96 well plate warps, it kind of ruins the last month of your work. And so we went in and we're like, okay, is warping a problem? And everyone's like, no, not really. I don't see that very often. And then we asked, can you think of ever that this happened? And man, customers got really animated. They were like, oh my gosh, it was horrible. I lost a month of work and blah, blah, blah. And so that was the question that you ask. Availability of a story tends to overestimate how often it happens in the minds of people. If there's been a shark attack somewhere, people will overestimate the prevalence of shark attacks by up to 10 times. Because they remember the last time that it happened. So that's a really powerful way. Peter. Thank you. People do not forget. Yeah, the guy with the plastic warping, it had happened in 1986. But he remembered, and because he remembered the pain, right? It's the hot stove. You never forget when when you touch the hot stove. So this is a really powerful agent of change. Remember a time when such and such happened. That's it. You want to make change inside the company? You want to point to the problem statement? Remember a time when this happened. Remember how bad it was. We're not doing that again. We're doing something else. Consistency is also incredibly powerful. This can play both sides for you. This is really hard. And this goes to the bottom line of why Stephen and Jasmine were talking a lot about whether change is hard, whether change is complex. It's because the human brain does not want to become inconsistent with its prior choices, right? So if you've made a choice, it is highly likely that you will make the same choice again. Highly, right? There's multi-billion-dollar industries that were built on this very, very notion. The direct mail industry. If they found one action that you'd taken in buying something with direct mail, they could guess with a lot of predictability what products to put in front of you because there's a much higher chance that you would buy them again. So consistency is really important. And I'll tell you a story here really quickly. So we were working with a company that was trying to figure out why salespeople were really dissatisfied with the quality of leads that were coming out of marketing. Who's ever heard that one before? Never. That's never happened. I was shocked. So, and there was legitimate reasons on both sides. The marketing people had really vetted the leads. Like these were actual real people who were, who had stated that they wanted to buy something. Salespeople also had a very legitimate beef with this. Like we sent follow-up emails and nobody responded back. So we said, let's look at those emails. And the emails were really great and very professionally written. Like, hi, my name is Sandy. I'm the sales rep for this. I'd like to take some time to introduce my product to you, blah, blah. We asked permission to change the first line of the email. And all we wrote was, last Thursday, you requested to talk to a salesperson from this company. I am fulfilling your request. Responses went up 40x. 40. And that's because what we were trying to do is test this idea. This person, at some point, we have no idea why, chose to give their name to this company and say, have a salesperson contact me. All we said to them is, be consistent with your prior choice. Boom. They responded really. And we use this in, we recruit market research respondents all the time. We use this all the time. We say, 3 months ago, you responded to a survey about this topic. We have, more questions to ask you. Can you please respond? And that's how we optimize our responses. And then the final one is consensus. People do, like, the human brain is like, this choice is really kind of hard. I really respect Travis. Like, I'm going to see what he did. Okay, he made that choice. I'm going to make the same choice too because, he's like he represents. And we just assume that other people have done more rigorous thinking around this. So consensus is also very, very powerful in sales and marketing, but also in driving change. So 7 different ways that you can make change a little bit less sucky than it actually is. But don't forget the different types of innovation where we were going. So I'm going to pause for a quick sec. Questions, comments, observations, jokes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there ever a clash between authority and likeness?
Ooh, yeah. You have to, yeah, absolutely. So the question for anybody who didn't hear, is there a clash between authority and likeness? And yes. So I'll actually give an example on that. We were trying to get a product into the early majority market. And the KOL, the sort of KOL roster that this client had was really well pedigreed. Like really well pedigreed people, like Nobel laureates or people that are high up like that. And we posited that very thing. We said, these people are out of reach. What we need to do is show like a workaday scientist using this thing, right? And just basically bring it down to earth. And that's what we did. We went and we found all the publications that weren't like Cell, Nature, and Science, but we found the other ones that showed utility. And that was a lot more successful for the company. Like, we also used that I only worked with Illumina on one product. And it was a product where it did not have the best specs in the market. And they didn't know how to like essentially position this thing. And we leveraged that very thing that, you bring it out, this is for the common, like it's for the everyday lab. Great question, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, David.
So, consensus, I think I usually hear that as social proof.
Hmm?
Differentiating this at all, or is that basically social proof?
It is social proof. Yeah, it's social proof, but it's social proof.
I have more of a comment than a question on the likeness part, the relationship building. I'm a marketer in the life science industry, but I do not have a science background. I don't have a science degree. I've never been at the bench. And I feel like one thing that has become key to me and is key for anyone who's marketing in this room who doesn't have a science background is that relationship building with your scientists at the company. And that made all the difference for me in being able to do my job, was building those relationships with the scientific team and having like that really good relationship with them so that I could ask them the questions when I didn't understand the science and make sure that we were saying things the right way that scientists would understand. So I felt like that was a really, really key area within the company where that point in particular was super important.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I completely agree with you, and I think that's a really, really brilliant observation. And I'll just mention, like, you are in no less of an opportunity. In fact, I would argue that you may be better positioned to drive innovation within this industry because you're not over indoctrinated into things, right? I'll talk about some tools in a minute, and hopefully you'll see exactly why I think you're well positioned. Siobhan.
Yeah. So I want to just add on to that. I am a marketer with a science background, but when I go and talk to customers, scientists, and also giving presentations, I recognize that I'm not the scientist who knows what that person knows, and I don't go in expecting that I'm going to be able to tell this person about their science. And so your point about, regardless of what background you have, asking them the questions until the point that you understand in a way that's relevant for the conversation you want to have is really going to be the key. And it also feeds their ego. Scientists love to talk about what they do. And it's important to them to be able to explain that. They want to be able to explain it, especially to somebody who's trying to learn that. So I agree that that's a really important thing to do and not shy away from.
I think there's going to be a great discussion in the customer panel. I had some discussions last night at dinner or at the drinks about that very thing that you all just talked about, with this idea that, the customer's a scientist, I need to go and sort of out-science them, is a fallacy. So, yeah.
I was wondering if you could share an example of
Reciprocity.
in
Yeah.
action,
Yeah.
like in a marketing campaign.
Sure. So the question is, can I talk about an example of reciprocity in a marketing campaign? Absolutely. So if you do anything on behalf of the industry or on behalf of the constituents or the beneficiaries, that you're essentially aligning yourself with the mission or the purpose of the customer that you're trying to sell. So like, you're trying to cure cancer, we're trying to cure cancer too, and we want to enable you to cure cancer, but we're going to make a donation on like everyone's behalf to a particular cause. That's an overt example of that. There could be much more nuanced examples of that, where, if you go above and beyond in educating a particular market, like above and beyond, and you do it. So I have that's really tied in with the idea of what leadership means, and I have a very specific sort of personal dogma about what leadership is. I feel like a leader is a servant, right? Like I fully, completely believe that. And so I think that goes hand in hand with the idea of reciprocity. A leader has the greatest responsibility to do the hardest work, to ask the hardest questions, to answer the hardest questions, to tackle the hardest problems. And so that generates immeasurable amounts of reciprocity in the market. So, but you can't, you shouldn't, for everybody who's in here who's like thinking about this as like an analytics framework, please don't. This isn't gonna be like, okay, well, how's our reciprocity campaign doing? You know what I mean? You have to really sort of embody that idea that a leader is just basically there to serve its constituents. So, yeah.
How does my commercial team better communicate to management that we don't have enough authority in the company?
Within the company
Within
or
within the company.
outside?
Our field team gets the feedback that we don't have enough recognized authority on a certain space.
Oh, I see. How do you signal that
But
back
management thinks we do.
to the... Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, and this is a knee-jerk reaction, is actually like test the market. I would say that's the most sobering thing you can do, is to just put it to the test and say, okay, does this company actually have the authority that we think it does? You know, and you get a sort of a nonpartisan referee on that, and the question gets answered. The bigger question that almost always comes up right after that is, okay, now how do we fix the problems that we have, or where's this gap coming from? You know, why is it that internally we have a different perception than the outside, and so on? That would be the number one thing I would say. So,
I would propose you pose that question to the next panel, which are three individuals in executive leadership, and let's see what they say.
there you go.
All right, there's a question over here, Hamid.
Yeah, go.
Hi. Within your customer journey,
Yeah.
when you have two teams that are innovating in different parts of it, have you seen that impact where you're talking about the structural
Yeah.
element of organizational change? Example would be, say you have a team working on acquisition and they're just pummeling with emails. And then you have a team on loyalty and rewards, and where they're trying to be more thoughtful and targeted and everything. Do you see, I'm not taking the analytical route,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
metrics and
yeah.
everything, but from a philosophical sense, do you see silos of innovation that compete with each other within the same sales and marketing
It can, yeah,
even though
absolutely.
the customer's the same for them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, once a company gets to a certain size, and again, I'm not an authority on this, on sort of company structure, so I'm not going to comment on whether something is good or bad, whether you have these different teams or whatever. But the conventional wisdom is, if you want me to affect change to a market, then I need to actually reach that market directly, and don't make me go through intermediaries, and don't put like anything in the way. What the problem is, then the same person is getting 14 emails from the company with different offers, right? And so what ends up happening is that all of those, whether on purpose or most likely inadvertently, they're depositioning the company, right? It's like it's innovative, it's tried and true. Which one are you? Okay, I'm gonna think you're nothing, you know, because you just want my money. Like that's essentially what happens in those situations. So I'm not a big fan of policing things. I'm much more of a fan of giving sort of the highest level guidelines so that everyone, works that way, and you let your market. I mean, those people will be like, I'm getting too many emails from you, unsubscribe me, and then you can fix the problem. If you're actually focusing on the numbers, then you can fix the problem before it gets too bad. You see what I mean? So. But yes, absolutely, those are the case. I do think, though, that a way to solve that is to make sure that everyone's oriented and animated towards the right North Star. Every brand, every company, even the divisions of large companies, they embody different senses of purpose and responsibility. That should actually drive. So there's a panel this afternoon about how culture can create content for you. And I think that's a really key area to sort of, orienting everyone in the right. See how much more fun it is when you guys talk? Yeah.
Do you think there's, maybe mapping is not the right word, but connection between different stages of innovation and the change vehicle you use?
Yes, absolutely. So Albina was asking if there's a benefit from creating a matrix between the stages of innovation and which vehicles are used. Absolutely. I mean, the sort of obvious example are when you're trying to get a technology in the consumer world, when you're trying to get a technology into like later stage people, you don't use the same channel, right? It's the same thing in our space. So that's a great point. So. Okay, so all this great talk about innovation, these tools, you can actually use these tools. Like seriously, the next time you're in a conversation either with a team internally and you want to see if you can get people to like just behave a little bit differently, just think about one of these 7 and be like, let's just try it, Remember, what's the most powerful word in any language? No. Thank you. No. Okay, so So how do you actually drive this change? The first thing that you should do is actually start to imagine the desired change. You know, we want 100% adherence to a thing. We want, you know, whatever. Just articulate it very clearly and imagine what that is. And then identify which heuristic or heuristics you want to use that are really maybe what's getting in the way of people doing that. Listen, every single person is reactive to two things. What is my default choice? And then what are my incentives to change that default choice? That's it. So really understanding which heuristic is going to sort of get people off the default choice and move a different direction is really key and really important. And then finally, reducing barriers to promoting that change. So again, these heuristics, all they're doing is just making it a little less sucky, just a little less sucky to change. Still sucks. Okay, I want to talk about some tools, and I want to go fast, and I have to admit that I don't remember which slides I hid and didn't hide, and this is not my computer, so we're all just going to see what we get here. I'm on for the ride just like you all are. Okay, so the first one is research, specifically qualitative research, and even better, ethnographic research. I once had somebody at a very reputable company. She's like, my sales in this particular thing is just not growing at all. And I suggested, I'm like, why don't we do ethnographic research? And he's like, what am I going to learn by watching people pipette? I'm like, watch me. And we went into a couple of labs, and you walk in, and we walked out with like 4 new product ideas. That's what you that's what you learn by asking people. So really, these are things like advisory boards. These are in-depth interviews. These are ethnographic studies, but talk to the customer. That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter. If you're a salesperson, I know your time is incredibly valuable, but like just notice what's happening around you, you know, and bring that back. And I say that with a huge asterisk. For those of you who manage sales teams, I don't know if you want to back me up on this or not, but a lot of companies, like that, the salesperson's job is not to unearth the trends in the market. The salesperson's job is to sell the product with the customer that's in front of them right now, right? It's not their job to like come back with market research, you know. Wow. That's time for me to move on from that one. So you know, there's actually tools for you to do ethnographic studies, but walking in. A great example of this is how when Invitrogen redesigned the Gipco bottles, because they noticed things from a new way by just asking novel questions. Gipco bottles used to be round. They used to be tall. The hole was on top. Well, guess what? They take up more space on the lab. They and everyone pipettes sideways. Boom. A bottle that was completely redesigned, and they spent a whole bunch of time redesigning the labels as well, because everyone was writing stuff and sticking, you know, glue on them and all that stuff. Just made it easy. This is innovation, by the way. This is the biggest innovation, in my opinion, that happened in the cell culture and cell media. There's no like magic new formula or anything like that. That was it, bottle. Very innovative. One thing that was really interesting, we were doing this ethnographic study with a company, and this is during the time when, like, you know, lab shutdowns and trying to figure out how work was happening and so on. And a lot of companies were trying to figure out, okay, how can we support our customers? Well, let's send them PPE stuff. Let's, you know, do webinars to create, all that stuff was good. One of the things that our client noticed was everyone was like putting their experimental stuff in these bins. We're like, what's that all about? And they said, well, you know, we can't just leave our stuff anymore because we're in shifts now. And so I have to make sure that my stuff doesn't get touched when I'm not here. And so the company created these beautiful bins that were really well designed for, you know, the experiment type that they supported. That's the kind of stuff that you get if you do qualitative research, especially ethnographic research. But it doesn't just have to be ethnographic research. It can also be just qualitative research. You can actually talk to people on the phone. I'll give you 2 examples of how big insights happened during a conversation. This is in Western blotting. I don't know, does everybody here know what a Western blot is? So it's a gel, you run it, you know, and man, and this is actually me. I was the one who was moderating this conversation. And this person, she was like, you know, people are fooling themselves with these Western blots. These things suck. They're not at all reliable. They're not repeatable. They're not quantitative. I don't believe in this stuff. You know, I've been in this for 20 years. It's just the Western blotting just needs to die, right? And I was looking at a screener survey that this very same person had responded, and they said that they did like 5 to 10 Western blots a week. So I'm like, so how often are you having these accuracy problems? And she's like, oh no, mine are fine. What just happened? What just happened here, right? And if you ask that question, if you're listening for these shifts in how people like reposture themselves, that is a huge clue, a huge clue. This person went on to tell me that she believes that Western blotting is actually, rather than pretending like it's a science, it's actually more of an art. And that this person felt that they could train someone in 6 months to run a good Western blot, but that the training quality in Western blot, you know, running has degraded over the years. So this led to, you know, an insight that led to a campaign that led to new products and so on. And it wasn't just one person, right? This was happening every single person that we were talking to. So these are the kinds of insights that you can gain. Here's a really fun one. We were talking to a doctor in the NICU. So this is the neonatal ICU. Heaven forbid any of you have children that have been to the NICU. However, I can tell you that the NICU is a place of a beautiful amount of hope that's in there. So it's actually a really lovely part of the hospital. And this is a neonatologist. We were interviewing them, and she was like, yeah, and that's when, you know, the patient, we know that they need to be auxiliary, blah, blah, blah. And the moderator's like, I'm sorry, can I ask you why you're whispering? And she's like, well, you know, these neonates are subject to a lot of stress. And so what we really want to do is reduce the amount of stress that we give them. And the moderator's like, so what's all that beeping that I'm hearing in the background? Right? And that led to our client basically saying, you know what? We have the technology to be able to do remote monitoring in the nurse's station, turn off all the beeping, and let's actually reposition our entire portfolio for how we reduce stress. Because this is something that we then tested, and clinically, yes, there was a correlation between stress reduction and long-term viability of these babies, and so we leveraged that. It came from the moderator noticing that the person is whispering on the phone. Right? You have to be fully present in these conversations. You have to have beginner's eyes. If you are too indoctrinated into science, you take too many assumptions, right? You just like, I know exactly what's happening here. What am I going to learn from watching people pipette? A lot, it turns out. So for those of you who may not have a science background, you actually have a special place in this industry because you are much more likely to see these things than I am. So, you know, really, respondents aren't going to offer the insights. You have to be listening and watching with all of your senses. You have to go beyond the functional descriptions. Like, just going there and talking science for an hour doesn't get us anywhere, right? You have to ask these other questions. Tell me a story when this happened. Or, hey, what's that? Why do you have it there? Let's open up the fridge or the freezer. What's all the little labels that fell off that are on the bottom? What's happening there? Like, you just ask these kinds of questions. They come up with innovation ideas for you. And then prompt for stories. Again, tell me a time when such and such happened. There's a lot of falsified beliefs. If you ask a question to someone, especially someone you've never met before, they're going to give you the answer they think you want to hear, right? And so you have to probe for those gently. You can't just be like, oh, no, you're lying to me, right? But probe for them gently, like, oh, yeah, you did this. Were you scared? Like, what was actually going through your mind, Like that, those are the kinds of questions. Like, what was really going on to your mind when you were doing this? And then jobs to be done, I'm not going to talk about right now. It's a whole other, it's a whole other thing. But the gist of it is, people don't buy products to use them. People hire a product to do a job for them. And that job is usually an emotional satisfaction job. So the question was posed, why is there a large group of people who buy a McDonald's milkshake before 8:30 in the morning? And they tried really hard with new flavors and all this stuff, and nothing changed. What happened was the group of people were hiring that milkshake to keep them entertained during a long commute, because it's so thick that you can't gulp it down in 2 sips, and it will keep you entertained for 45 minutes. That's the emotional job to be done. This is a whole other area of expertise, but if any of you are dive into it, it'll blow your minds. The next one is how to build scenarios, and this is what I want to end on, and I'm just going to fly through it. But if you don't take anything else out of this, the bottom line is that every single business leader, and the next panel has business leaders sitting here and talking with you, they all want to make sure that they're making the right decision, right? If only they had a crystal ball, they would feel more comfortable and confident making the right decision. But here's the problem. Singular predictions almost never come true, right? You have a thesis, you have all this data going into it, you make that prediction, life changes, world changes. I posit, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I posit that there's also another opportunity for business leaders, which is instead of spending so much time predicting one thing, ask what the range of things are that are going to happen. Spend time preparing for possibilities, and that actually opens the door to a lot of innovation. So how do you do this? This is sort of like big strategy, big business strategy kind of stuff. But I'll show you exactly how you can use it as a salesperson, as a marketer, and so on. You look at the trends, every single industry has an up and to the right graph, right? Everything is just going to be more in 5 years, somehow, magically. But you ask yourself, what's driving that? And then you ask yourself, what could change that trajectory? That's the question I want all of you to take away from this. No matter what you hear, just ask yourself, what could change this trajectory? Oh, such and such is going to happen. What could change that? And just really think about it. That by itself will open up the door to more innovation thinking. But you do this, and then you basically say, okay, what are the most critical, uncertain forces that I can think of here? Political, economical, technological, environmental, scientific, cultural, like all of the big things that are out of our control and that are really, really critical and really, really uncertain. I love how the fonts here turned out with the L and the N. That's kind of sexy. You score all of these, and then you take the 2 that are most critical and most uncertain, and you map them against each other. And then you tell a story. You're like, okay, what does this world look like when we have ridiculous amounts of economic growth and reproducibility in science worsens, for example? Like, that is interesting. And then you look at it on the other side and you say, okay, what if reproducibility improves and we have economic growth? Or what world are we living in if there's an economic recession? Like, why do these things matter? You don't ask that question. You just tell the story in these worlds. And then what you say, the final piece is, you say, what are the implications of these stories? Oh, turns out 3 out of 4 of them are really going to be dependent on sort of technology innovation, and so we better be in a good position to drive that into the future. That is preparing for the future. That de-risks your predictions. You still need to make predictions. I'm sorry. Like, this is why executives do what they do, because they have to make hard decisions. But also, at the same time, you have to be prepared for other outcomes. And this is how you create innovative thinking. So this is how we were able to actually predict exactly how the pandemic was going to turn out with productivity in science. I mean, and everyone beat us up for this. Like, what do you mean there's going to be a huge thing? Oh, guess what? Q2 of 2022, man, it was like printing money in this industry. Here we are. And then the second one was, but your normal work going into the pandemic is lower than normal work coming out. Well, yes, automation, things like that, because we did scenario planning work to get to this, and we did a lot of data taking to get to this. So that's an example. So identifying those driving forces. How is X, which may not actually be connected to Y, going to affect me, right? You identify those, and then you find the critical uncertainties, you create plausible scenarios, and then you ask yourself, how would I react in each of those? What is my superpower? What is my responsibility? What's my rearguard action? That is a way of opening up all kinds of new innovative work for you. So I'm not going to do exercise. And then here's sort of my challenge to you. It's everyone's responsibility. And it actually makes work a lot more fun, believe it or not. It's a lot more fun. So if you're in marketing, I hope you noticed I didn't talk at all about AI or technology or anything like that, right? You might have actually expected that that's all I was going to talk about is innovations in marketing. Let's talk about AI, and let's talk about this. Look, I'm not a laggard, but I'm also not an innovator when it comes to technology. I believe that technology is there to serve you. And what I've noticed, especially in marketing, is that you implement technology and then you spend your entire career serving it. Google tells me to publish 2,000 words, right? It's the wrong way around. I believe that if you create a really good strategy for where you want to go, then you pick and choose the technology that's best served to get you there. Don't just serve the technology for its purpose, because then Meta wins, not you. Right? And so I really believe that this is an area where you can really ask yourself these questions of saying, how are we going to innovate in marketing? How are we going to use these tools in ways that they haven't been used before? How are we going to actually usher new, novel ways of doing things? Get an insight. Think about how people make decisions. What is the default choice, and what is the best incentive I can offer them to get them off that default choice? Those are really exciting, innovative questions that you can ask yourself, whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, and whether you're an individual contributor or running an entire company. But the difference can just be amazing and really, really fun. So if you are part of a team, you can schedule a future visioning day. You can actually do like a quick and dirty scenario plan. Just sit down and talk about where the world is going. What are the forces that are at play? What's critical to us? What's uncertain to us? What does the world look like if those things actually came true? This is how Shell Oil was able to predict the oil shortage and crisis in the 70s. They did scenario planning. They're the ones who actually popularized this. When everyone else was running out of oil, Shell was like, ha, we got you. Because they'd been stockpiling, because they'd been prepared for this. And they knew what to look for. If those oil wells start to go offline, for whatever reason, if these countries start to talk to each other, we know that something is going to happen. And so you can do the same thing. And then here's another good one. Like, go to work, and this you can do personally, and be like, can I remove one thing that I take for granted? And then just even do a thought exercise of what I do from there. And then ask, when you're developing your strategies, is this unique, or is this what everybody else does? So I'm not going to take the time for anybody else who's going to talk. Thank you very much for interacting with me, and it's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.